You are remembering every little thing that you've done or not done, and nobody else is remembering those things because they're busy remembering their own.
I waited every day for an email, for a offhand comment, for a text, for something that was going to reiterate to me that I was doing a bad job. You're not on par, you need to be working more, you need to be doing more. And that was like my constant loop that I got into every single day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Full Circle, the Magic Mindset podcast. My name is Matt Karlberg, and I am joined today, of course, with my co-host, Leah Lilly. And we're really excited to bring the second episode where we will dive a little bit deeper into Impostor Syndrome. We look to bridge the gap between psychology and astrology. And to do that, we have myself on the psychology side, and then we have Leah on the astrology side.
If you haven't already, head over to leahlilly.com/fullcirclepodcast to listen to last week's episode. It is the part 1 of this series of 2 episodes where we really dive into just some of the basics of imposter syndrome and what that brings up on both the psychology and astrology side of things. Today we'll be diving into a little bit more of each of our personal experience with imposter syndrome. But to get in the context of what we're talking about today, the first episode will definitely help you jump on the same page. So highly recommend hopping over to the website and checking that out. Again, it's on leahlilly.com/fullcirclepodcast. And we're also on Spotify and iTunes. So you can listen to us there as well.
It's a real barn burner. It's probably the best episode we've ever done.
Did you say barn burner?
Yeah, it's a barn burner. I grew up in the Midwest, so if you don't understand, that's not my fault.
And okay, so elaborate. What is this barn burning you speak of?
I don't know why it's a phrase, but I know that it means that it's good.
Because burning a barn
is
good. A great idea.
Well, okay, so is next week's episode going to be about the etymology of barn burner?
You know, we might have to add it to the list of topics.
I think that for the people that did listen last week, it might be a good idea for us to just do a quick recap of what we discussed in that episode. And one of the things that I think would be really fun is to put a time limit on it, which will force us to really focus on the things that are super important to us. Leah, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Oh boy. Well, time makes me nervous, and there's no time like the present, so let's go.
Okay, I'll count you in, and you have 30 seconds to tell us everything that there is to know about imposter syndrome from our first episode. 30 minutes and 30 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so from the last episode, what's really important on the astrological side, letting your instincts lead, and those can be found in your personal astrology. You probably know some of what your personal instincts are, but the more familiar you can get with your instincts, your strengths, and your skills, learn that making mistakes in that process is okay, and trying things out is okay, and making peace with your past and your past trauma, and just let yourself practice getting good at things, let yourself practice getting stronger in things and getting more clear about what those things are, then that imposter syndrome starts to fade away. So get into your heart, get into your soul, get into your birth chart, find where these things live so that you can start to feel more comfortable in who you are and less like you need to fit into society or other people's definitions of what you should be.
I think that the segment might have been misunderstood. That was a minute.
Well, how was I supposed to know 30 seconds?
I have a stopwatch. I don't know.
Weren't you supposed to say stop?
I didn't want to interrupt you. It was good information. Leah.
Don't Leah me.
To show you how it's done, I will go ahead and I'll do my 30 minutes in 30 seconds, and I'll stick to 30 seconds instead of 60 seconds.
Okay.
Gone in 60 Seconds is maybe what you were thinking of. Nicolas Cage film, very worthwhile. Do you want to count me into my 30 seconds?
I would love to. 3, 2, 1, go.
So I think that the most important things to understand about imposter syndrome are, one, the cause. So the first cause is fear, fear of pushing boundaries in both personal and professional growth, and we'll talk about those more today. And I think that the second part that you need to know is how we move on from it. And I think it's by taking action to fix the problem instead of the symptoms, by educating ourselves or sharing those feelings. And there's more to say, but that's 30 seconds. One of the most exciting things from the initial release of this podcast is the great engagement that we got from our listeners. I think that's one of the things that I want to prioritize moving forward. And Leah, I'm sure you feel the same. And I think we can spend a little bit of time talking about some of the things that were shared by listeners and through their experiences with imposter syndrome. Did you have somebody that particularly caught your eye?
Yeah, I mean, first, just to say thank you to everybody who's not only reached out just about the podcast in general, but also engaging with us around the theme that we've chosen to explore over these 2 episodes. It's really special to create a space where we can actually have a conversation about it. I mean, as we do on this podcast between you and I, Matt, but it's nice to bring other voices and thoughts into the mix so that we can just expand our understanding of each topic that we discuss and what it brings up for different people, because we're all so different. One of the responses that I saw that kind of got me thinking over the week was about feeling imposter syndrome at work, and that sometimes coming up. And one of the examples that we received that I thought was really interesting was feeling like when there is not enough work being given to us, that maybe we're not good enough at our job, maybe we're not good enough to handle it, so we're kind of being, I don't know what the right word for it is.
Sure, I mean, it's like feeling because we're not getting work, maybe I did something wrong before and now my bosses know that I don't belong here, kind of that approach.
Yeah, I can't do it. They think I won't be able to handle the task, like all those stories that you kind of make up in your head about what it means when something's not happening. So that coming up and then sort of that thought pattern creating this imposter syndrome feeling because, okay, maybe I'm not good enough at this job as a whole, like it starts a snowball. So I thought that was interesting, and I think most of the responses around imposter syndrome that I was getting this weekend that I saw had to do with feeling it at work the most.
I think if I were to pick one person that reached out this week, I had someone reach out to me personally that had been talking about how, they got to what they thought was their dream job and had done, a lot of movements in their personal life to get there, and realized, oh my gosh, I don't really even enjoy this work that I'm doing. And so the way that they are choosing to move forward from that is explore other options and see, hey, what are the things that I'm passionate about that now I have the opportunity to go make a career of, because I've figured out that what I thought I wanted isn't actually what I wanted. So I think similar to the example that you provided, Leah, I think a lot of people feel this in their professional lives.
Yeah, and I love what you bring up because it just reminds me that, you said the person that reached out to you, contacted you about, like, I'm in my dream job and now that I'm in it, it doesn't feel like something doesn't feel right. And that can be such a beneficial experience if we let it be of, like you said, now I'm in a position to kind of say, okay, this maybe isn't it for me. What about this experience is working for me? And where do I want to go forward from here? And that may be because you're in that place, you may have more options than you had before.
I think one of the things that, I obviously I spent some time with this week, and one of the things that I hadn't considered that you just sparked within my brain just now is I think that there are two approaches to getting to your dream job and realizing that it's not what you wanted. And I think one is, the very healthy approach this individual took where it's like, okay, this is what life is, and how do I take this experience and move forward from it? And the other one is the fear that we talked about in the first episode. Oh my gosh, I thought this is what I wanted and it's not what I wanted. And what am I going to do? And, how am I going to live and pay bills and all these things? And that fear can become so crippling that you can't move in a positive direction from it. And so I think that that's a really interesting thing that you brought up there.
It really is the sort of first hurdle that we come up to when we're talking about imposter syndrome is fear. Like that's going to be one of the biggest indicators. It's going to be one of the biggest warning signs. It's going to be one of the biggest contenders in moving past it is fear. Because fear wants to keep us where we are, and it's so uncomfortable to move through what we're afraid of. But as you mentioned kind of in your recap too, and as I'm sure we're going to see as we sort of hop into more of our personal experience, the only way around fear is through it. So how do you get to a place where you say, okay, I feel equipped to like go into this and jump into this with both feet? And that can be a process. It can be a process. Which, brings us really beautifully into kind of what's happening right now astrologically. We're moving into Virgo season. So we're in it now. We saw the transition from Leo to Virgo season happen at the end of last week. And that transition from season to season can always be really, really interesting. Specifically for Leo to Virgo season, it sort of feels like playtime is over. Summertime is sort of coming to an end as back to school season hit us. And I know kids have been back in school for a little bit now, but it's really that feeling of kind of back to school, organization, setting down, making a plan, coming up with your routine and your schedule, and being able to dive into a little bit more structure for yourself over the next season. So, in thinking about, and even in what we were just talking about of like, am I in my dream job? Am I not? Sort of taking stock of that, understanding where you are. And then Virgo season is a really supportive time to start planning what moves you're going to make either in your dream job that you're in to fully step into and embrace that, or this is not quite right for me. What moves do I need to slowly start making? What actionable things can I start to do to put myself where I want to be? So Virgo season is going to encourage us to ask those questions and to actually write down some answers on paper, which can be a little bit terrifying for some of us. So we're going to each respond to Virgo season differently. We're going to each respond to the transition from season to season differently, depending on if you're a fire sign or a water sign, air sign. They all interact differently. So that's kind of what we're seeing in terms of what's coming up there and how interesting that ties with what we were just talking about.
I think one of the images that came to mind, and feel free to correct me if I'm off here, but it's kind of taking that unbridled passion from Leo, where it's just like, boom, I'm going to get stuff done. And Virgo is taking the reins and moving it in a certain direction towards, whatever that goal is moving forward. Does that sound right?
Definitely. Because Leo season is all about connecting with our truth, connecting with those things that make us feel fiery and passionate and awesome. And we've been exploring what that might be over the past month. And now that you've sort of understood what that might be or have a glimpse of it or are really living it, it's like, now what are you going to do to make sure that shows up concretely in the world? It's not just an idea and a fun thing to think about and something that brings you a lot of joy and passion. It's how are you actually now bringing it into the physical world, living it, doing it, making it happen, nurturing it so that it can become a real thing versus just an idea or a truth that you're holding in your heart or in your mind.
Awesome. we've talked on we talked on the last podcast about how I really got brought in to some level of understanding of this stuff during cancer season. And I like that we've kind of progressed from, cancer season, here's all these feelings that we have. Leo season, let's take those feelings and be passionate about them and take action. And now Virgo is saying, okay, you've got some great stuff started through that passion. How do we refine that and make it, useful for the future?
Yeah. It's a great way to work with the universal energy that just is happening on a daily basis. Like knowing that this is going to be a good time for planning. Virgo season, like big idea season, has kind of come to a slowdown. That was Leo season. So if you're trying to think of big, grand ideas during this next month and they're just not coming, the energy of the universe isn't really at that point. So when you can understand, okay, the current of the energy right now is get organized and refine, if you can use that to your advantage, it's going to create some really awesome benefits for you. Or just practice using those things to your advantage, because not everybody is, an earth sign. Not everybody is in that sort of practicality realm. And that's totally understandable. We are all different, but practicing those things so that you are able to utilize the energy that just naturally is happening so you don't have to work as hard makes things a little bit easier. Our featured business this week is High Vibe Healing Gems, owned by my amazing friend Carly Love. It was established 3 years ago, and they offer high-quality crystals from trusted sources, gemstone jewelry, and mala beads for meditation and intention. Carly has some awesome crystals on her store. She is one of the places that I go to for crystals. Highly recommend everything in her shop. And not only that, but you are working with someone who has an incredible depth of knowledge when it comes to crystals and crystal healing. There are links on our website for you to check out Carly's shop online and links to her social media so that you can give her a little bit of love.
When I was a kid, I had a mineral collection, and one of the minerals that I was particularly drawn to was hematite, just because it's such a shiny, pure-looking substance, at least. And the first thing that drew my eye on Carly's shop was she has a hematite set of mala beads, and they are pretty cool looking. And I don't know, I just wanted to share that childhood experience coming back to visit me now.
Yeah, hematite's a really cool one. I actually wear a hematite bracelet right now. I found it in a little shop, and it had a lot of energy, so that's the one I got. But it's really cool because it regulates the blood flow in the body. It can be helpful for that, interestingly enough. So cool stone with some cool properties. And I love that it looks like if you just had a bunch of hematite pieces or beads that they would just all stick together. It looks magnetic, which I find pretty cool about it.
One of the things that I think is important to us as we work on bridging the gap between the psychology side of things and the astrology side of things is to give very real examples. And last time we talked primarily about the textbook approach and, learned helplessness and things like that. So today what we'd like to do is talk through maybe our personal experiences with imposter syndrome and some of the things that we've dealt with, and hope that those experiences translate to you as a listener and your life, and maybe provide some clarity and give you the understanding that you're not alone in feeling the things that you feel. Has imposter syndrome burrowed its way to have a presence in your life, Leah?
It has. I think it's a natural part of being a Virgo, and I think I mentioned that a little bit last week. Virgos are on a mission for perfection, and what that looks like to each Virgo is a little bit different, but I think it can bring up some really big feelings, especially for me in my own life, just in my personal experience. It's definitely there. It used to be more prevalent than it is now. But the first big sort of instance that I want to talk about with it was when I started my own business. When I started my first business, I was really excited because I had been working jobs in LA that were all right. It was those kind of things that you count down the minutes until you're off and count the minutes until you have to go back, and just a place that I worked at places I didn't want to be. And when I decided I was going to start my own business, I was really, really excited that I would finally have control over my own time, that I would be able to do something that I wanted to do, and that I would be able to do it from home because I'm a little bit of an introvert. Virgo is represented by the Hermit card. Hello, that's me. I own it. I live it. So I was really looking forward to being able to be at home and do my thing. I started a social media agency, and I was doing social media for businesses and had a couple of clients and was working with them. But I could not shake this feeling of not being qualified to do the work I was doing. And it started, the first month I started this business, and don't get me wrong, I was super excited about it. It was wonderful to be like, I started this, I put this together, I put the branding for this together, I made this whole thing, I made all of my processes, I figured out what I was able to offer people, I offered it, they bought it. Like, it was really, really exciting. But I couldn't get myself into the excitement. I was in constant dread and terror and fear of, when is the minute that my clients are going to call me on the phone and say, you have no idea what you're doing. You're not giving us our money's worth. This is terrible. What you do is terrible. We just don't want any part of it. I waited every day for an email, for a offhand comment, for a text, for something that was going to reiterate to me that I was doing a bad job. And I was telling myself that every day. I was like, there's more you could be doing. There's more you could be offering. Look at what these other businesses offer. Look at what these other social media agencies offer. You're not on par. You need to be working more. You need to be doing more. And that was like my constant sort of loop that I got into every single day. So before I knew it, this business that I had started, that I was so excited about and so passionate about doing and making it happen, I was suddenly so stressed. I'm looking at it a year later saying, this is something that I wanted. This is something that I put time into. It's exactly like we were talking about at the beginning of this episode. Somebody is in their dream position. It's like, this is what I always wanted, and I'm the most unhappy I've ever been. And I couldn't figure out how I had gotten myself to that place. I couldn't figure out, I had control over this the whole time. And so I think the other thing that came up, in addition, sort of on the side of being an imposter, was being so angry at myself for feeling that way. It was like, I shouldn't feel this way. Why are you being like that? That's so ridiculous. You just need to and then, you tell yourself, oh, just have confidence in yourself. It's fine. You're doing great. And that's easier said than done. So I'm sitting here with a business that I'm like, how did I create this monster that I thought was going to make me happy that's just not right for me? And, oh my God, I've just made this huge mistake. And I don't think it was
it's
that.
Your life, right?
Yeah, it is. I think when you get to that sort of heightened position, that's what it looks like. That's the view you're getting. And you kind of have to step outside yourself and say, okay, what's actually really going on here?
I think I have two questions for you that kind of sparked into my mind while you were talking. I think one, do you feel like there's any level of kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy there where you start to feel, this isn't right, I'm not doing it right, they're going to figure it out, this is all a ruse, a hoax, and they're going to find me out, and then I'm really going to be in trouble? Do you feel like there was any, there had to have been an impact on your work, and almost as though it started to come true and your work wasn't as good? Did you experience that at all?
I think for me, and again, I think it just has to do with my personal astrology, which, hello Virgo, I am a perfectionist. So you bet I'm going to be working my butt off to make sure that the stuff that I put out is good, especially if my name is going out on it. So I think for me, it was the opposite of, instead of I was sabotaging myself. Let's be real. I was sabotaging myself with some pretty negative thoughts that weren't true. But I used those to drive me harder to create more work. So I was working over 40 hours a week up till 2, 3 a.m., planning, strategizing, learning, consuming stuff to make my work better. So I think it drove me into sort of a overwork stage versus running my own work into the ground, if that makes sense. And that's not to say that that doesn't happen for some people, but for me, it was just a catapult into frenzy.
I think it's sabotage in a different direction, right? Instead of making it so the work isn't as good, it's making it so it's not healthy for you to continue on that trajectory. And there's no good enough, which, in some respects, it's good, but it's also not sustainable, right?
Yeah, and I think it came from a place of trying to be better than the competition versus just trying to do my best work, trying to do better than I did yesterday. And when you get into that sort of mindset of like, okay, I'm an imposter in this sort of setting in the social media agency world, I am an imposter. Who's doing it better than me? She is. What has she got going on? She offers this. Cool. I'm going to take that and make my own spin on it and offer something similar. And before you know it, your business is pieced together of elements that don't even resemble you. I looked at my business after a while and realized it wasn't me. When I sat with that, when that was the big thing, was like, this is not me anymore. It was like, oh, imposter syndrome just sort of melts away because I'm not trying to be that anymore. It was like, okay, cool. That's not me. Then the next question was, what is? And that's almost scarier than knowing what's not you.
And I think that you touched on what my second question for you was going to be is, you're obviously successful now, and I know that there's things that you want to work on, and you still occasionally struggle with some of that perfectionism, but you've been successful, and kind of wondering what the things were that you found that allowed you to start to move past the question to get to, what am I? What do I want to be? What do I want this to be?
Yeah. Yeah, I hit pretty much my rock bottom just in every sense last year, not only business, but in my personal life, just across the board. In that period when I was just struggling, found a coach and a mentor who I worked with who helped me find out what I was, right? Because I had just gone through the period of finding out what I wasn't. So then the question was, okay, well, what does make up who you are? And I worked with a coach who helped me sort of hone in on what that was and thought that was going to kind of be it. And was like, okay, I did it. I found out who I am. And now I can just like launch this business. It's going to be great. And that's not exactly what happened. I did some soul searching and sat with all of the stuff that came up and then sat some more and then sat some more and nothing was coming. And I started to get freaked out. And then it was like, oh my gosh, like what do I do? Because that business wasn't me and I need to fill the space with a new business. But I think that process of discovering your strengths, who you are, it's a lifetime process, but it also has moments where we focus in on it. And in that process, while I was focusing in, I found astrology, and that was the key for me. That was kind of the thing that connected everything. It connected everything together. In my life, in understanding who I was, in helping me answer some of the questions of who are you, what is it you need, what is it you want, where are you headed, I just received this map of all these answers and couldn't fathom not sharing that. And it was sort of this one more piece of the puzzle in what my business was going to be and what it was that I was able to offer. So I think in going through my own process and just allowing myself a little bit of time to do that, I found what it was that I was really proficient at, really strong in, and what made me unique. And since I have just followed that and not looked in any other direction and not looked back, I've seen some really incredible result. And it just took finding my unique focus. And I think that's where it's easy to get impatient. It's where I was impatient. But when I just allowed myself to say, okay, like it's going to come when it's going to come, and tell yourself that as many times as you need to and keep reminding yourself even when you forget, something amazing lands in your lap that you maybe weren't actively searching for, but it takes away the sort of swimming upstream that I felt I was having to do.
Kind of makes it feel a little bit easier to, wake up and do work during the day, right?
Yes, because I'm excited. I'm excited to sit down at my desk every morning and figure out what's going on with the planets or look at somebody's chart and prepare a brief for their session. It brings me genuine excitement to sit down and engage with this stuff, whereas that was not the feeling I was getting when I was doing social media stuff. It felt like work. And I know that's one of like the most cliche things we hear is like, if you find a job you love, you won't feel like you're working a day in your life. And that is overused, and sometimes we look at it and we're like, how could that possibly be true? But for me, it's true. So I'm curious on the opposite side of things, what you experience, because I know that my experience of things is rooted in the magic. But I'm curious how you've experienced imposter syndrome in your life.
Mine revolves a lot more around going from a place of feeling very much like you belong and that you know what's going on and you're good at what you do, and then finding yourself in this free fall of like, oh my gosh, I was kidding myself for all of those years. I actually have no idea what's going on, where I'm headed, and learning to just allow that to happen and figure things out as you go and know that life is a moving target, right? For me, when I was in, middle school and high school, and then slightly into college, I was used to school came pretty easily to me. The thing that I used to brag about is that my whole senior year of high school, I never took a single book home, which I know now is nothing to brag about. And I would obviously do it differently now if I could. But the idea is, I could get good grades and not have to worry about it too much. And the extracurriculars that I did, by the time I was a junior, I was leading them. All of that is not to toot my own high school horn, but just to say, like, I felt like I was good at the things that I was doing. And I felt like I was a big fish in a little pond. And then I went on to college and realized, hey, this school thing is maybe a little bit harder than I thought it was. And it took me a little while to get used to the speed of that level of academia. And, by the end of college, I had a real job, put that in air quotes. But I worked at a Fortune 50 company for 3 years of college. And by the end of it, I was feeling again like I was a big fish in a little pond. And then I graduated school and moved abroad and had a really rough, well, not abroad. I moved to the West Coast. To me, it was abroad, moving from, small town Midwest USA to the West Coast to a bigger city. And there I had a really rough 6 months where I just assumed if I apply for a job, I'm going to get it, of course. And I learned very quickly that nope, that's not how life always works. There's a lot of really qualified, really intelligent people out there, and you have to be able to do something to separate yourself. And from there, I've worked a lot of places and I think been good at what I do at those places, but it has been similar to your journey, a journey of figuring out how to regain that confidence and feel maybe not like you're a big fish in a little pond, because I think that evokes some negative connotations of where you're at, but feeling at least like a big fish again and getting that confidence back and feeling comfortable doing your day-to-day work and knowing that you're doing a good job. So I think our experiences were similar in journey, and I think similar in where we end up, mentally, the way that we feel about it, and kind of discovering who we are and what we enjoy. But I think the paths to get there were different.
I'm curious because I didn't have the same experience in terms of applying for, I guess, what you could call like career jobs. And I'm curious what that was like for you in terms of, like you said, that feeling you have of, I'm out of high school, I'm good, I'm a big fish, I can do this. And then that first rejection comes, and then the second. So what is that process? Where does your mind go? What are you experiencing in that, I guess, rejection process of applying for jobs like that?
I think the short answer to your question is it doesn't necessarily go to healthy places right off the bat. And for me, I lived in a bunch of different places over the several years after I graduated from college. And the interesting thing was, I'd be like, okay, well, I'll just apply for jobs in Portland. I'm living in Portland. I need to be here. So I'll just apply for jobs here. And, after a certain amount of time, it's like, okay, well, the jobs here aren't working out. So what do we do? How do we widen the net? And so that net just kept getting wider and wider and wider. And the wider that it gets, and you still don't hear anything, I mean, that starts to be, borderline traumatizing to realize, wow, it's not just this big city that doesn't want me. It's any city, anywhere. It's a very interesting time mentally to decide, how am I going to take this? Am I going to look at this and view it as a failure? Because when I was in school, it's like, okay, if I want the, I don't know, the male lead in the play, do I want that? Yes. Okay, I'll go get it. And I did. And now it's, okay, I want to go work at this place. This place really resonates with me. And you reach out and you don't hear anything, and you don't hear anything, and you don't hear anything. And then all of a sudden, after you've forgotten about the job, 3 months later, you get an email saying, hey, appreciate your application. We're going to go in a different direction. And it's like, okay, cool. I got rejected twice because I'd already forgotten that this one had happened. And now you've brought it back into my present mind. And so it's a very interesting time to continue to wake up and look for whatever that next career or job is going to be. And at this point, I've had 3 or 4 jobs that I felt like were going to be my career. And it has been a learning process. And that's where I get back to the similar place that you were at of who am I? Who am I, and who do I want to be? And hopefully now I've got a handle on that. And if for some reason I'm in the situation again where I'm looking for work, hopefully I can approach that in a really positive way. It's kind of getting to those key takeaways for me where you need to be addressing, and I'll put it again in air quotes, the problem instead of the symptoms. And sometimes that requires us to look head on at something and have an uncomfortable moment or two and come to that uncomfortable realization of, maybe I'm looking in the wrong direction. Maybe this isn't my dream job, like the example we talked about earlier. Or, maybe I'm in the right place, but there are things that I need to do to make myself better prepared. Or the last kind of option that I consider most often is maybe I just need to talk about it. Maybe somebody else is feeling the same thing, and maybe we're both in a better spot than we think we are. But what about you? What things, we've talked about this now for an hour across 2 weeks. What are the things that you're taking away and that you're going to apply in your day-to-day?
I think for me, and I love that we arrived at this today, really looking at where I am right now to say, okay, am I in my dream job? Am I in my dream life? Let's expand it all the way. What things are working for me? What things do I feel like I need to improve at? What things do I feel like are just not serving me? And from that, sort of understand, okay, where in space am I? Where am I feeling that imposter syndrome, and where is it coming from? So identifying those reasons, and those reasons for me, I think, will lie in what do I feel like I need to get better at? Getting really clear about what those things are, and then using this Virgo season energy to have some study time and plan some time out to actually indulge in and get better and stronger in those things. But I think the big takeaways from all of this discussion that we've had in the past episode and this episode is get to know yourself Get to know who you are. We all know what we're not. It's really easy to know what we're not, and it's easy to know what we don't want. Get to know who you are and what you do want, and start putting yourself in the situations that are going to foster those things in you, that are going to serve those needs, that are going to help you satisfy those wants that you have.
I think that segues really well into what I wanted to cover as our psychological wellness tip for today. Last week, we talked about self-acceptance. I think that self-acceptance fits really nicely with the takeaways that you've gathered from our conversations the last 2 weeks. But I think that another one that I would love to talk about from the 6-factor model of psychological wellness is personal growth. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time talking about is how to push those boundaries and the fear that's associated with those boundaries. And I think that for me, I had a lot of growth to do. And so it's the idea that you want to continue to develop, that you welcome new experiences, and that you recognize the improvement. And I think that this part is really important, the improvement in your behaviors and in yourself over time. So looking back and saying, here's where I was, here's where I am now. Wow, what a distance I've covered.
I love that. And I think it feeds so well into our tarot card for this week, which is the Death card.
That sounds not like a good card to have.
I know, and so many people are afraid of the Death card, which I get. It makes sense. There's a lot of fear and mystery and just unconscious stuff surrounding death, so no wonder we're afraid. And again, I will share this card on the website so that you guys can get a visual of this. When the Death card appears to me, it's about the cycle of life and death, right? This cycle of something dying and something being born, right? There is no death without life. There is no life without death. They are a cycle. And so this card really says to me, find the things that are not serving you and let those go. Let yourself kind of come into who is it I really am. I see the death of a version of ourselves that isn't quite in line with our dreams, our wants, our needs, our desires, and letting that version of ourselves, in the way that the phoenix does, crumble to ashes so that something is able to be born anew from that. You are able to walk forward from hopefully these 2 episodes or from whatever point you are in your life to say, okay, this is where I'm at and this is where I'm headed, and these are the things that I'm putting into my programming to help me get there. We get to choose how we want to react around death, and we can find excitement for the space that's being created for something new, or we can mourn over what once was. Thank you so much for joining us on Full Circle, the Magic Mindset podcast. If you want to learn more about the podcast or us, you can find us on www.lealily.com/Full Circle Podcast. That's LEALLY.com/Full Circle Podcast. If you want to engage in our community, we also have a Facebook page. You can find us there at Full Circle Podcast. We want to connect with you and hear your experiences and feelings around imposter syndrome and around all of our future themes. So be sure to join our community there. And we're also on Twitter, and you can connect with us there at FullCircle_pod. That's FullCircle_POD. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you all next week.